Hello and welcome to Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined as always by my co host, Jace. We are here to talk Game Week 6, more specifically the wildcard picks in Game Week 6. But before we get to that, Jace, will you tell me about your team in Game Week 5? How are you feeling after this week?
I still feel pretty meh. I got pretty lucky. It's probably about as jammy as you can get as far as subs off the bench go, but I captained Joda at the end of a very late night, hoping he could cover for Salah. So it didn't even play, but thank God I vice captained Holland and he returned as he has been doing. So I do feel lucky, but like we mentioned last episode, you don't want those points. I feel bad about those points. I don't really like
Can you
them.
give them
I
back?
don't know.
Is there like a return
Yeah.
system that we could?
I could take a lot of hits and not wild card and just deduct those
There you
points
go.
myself.
That's it.
I feel like that's fair
Yeah.
game.
Transfer the same guy out
Yeah,
like 3
3 times.
times,
Yeah,
out and back in,
yeah,
take the -4 for Muniz off the bench, and you're square.
yeah. But that sums up the game week. I had Mazraoui, Dunk, and Alexander Arnold in the back line. Mazraoui and Alexander Arnold returned. AA with the double return. Dunk, unfortunately, came back with a big old goose egg. In my midfield, I had Gordon, Kulusevski, Eze, and Smith Rowe. Smith Rowe, the only one of those that returned. But Gordon, had zero point 0.5 expected goal involvement. Kulusevski had 0.6 expected goal involvement. Eze had zero point 0.7 XGI, right? None of them returned. It's quite frustrating to watch, but thank God Smith Rowe returned, I guess.
I do wanna go back to your captaincy decision because you were kind of between Holland and Jota last week
And
on the
Trent.
podcast, and Trent. What made you decide of those guys to go Jota over Holland over Trent?
It's funny because Ryan and I were at dinner on Friday night, and I was talking to him. I was like, I think I might, captain Trent because, Chris captained Luke Shaw one week and it really paid off for him when he didn't have another choice. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll captain Trent. So I put the armband on Trent, and it's like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I'm looking at my team, pretty tired, and I'm like, that's a stupid idea. Like, just give it to Jota. Like I'm sure he'll return. I'm sure he'll return. Not even thinking like he played in the middle of the week already, and all the risk that went on with that. So I feel kind of bad about not sticking with Alexander Arnold, but what are you gonna do? You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, how risky do you wanna be? Because certainly by expected points, Trent would not have been the top projected point scorer even within your team. I
yeah,
think it would have been Holland,
yeah,
right?
yep,
So it's difficult to justify that course of action unless you yourself as an FPL player are saying, "I am willing to accept the consequences of this, like, non-optimal captaincy decision because I really believe in it." And it sounds like you just didn't quite believe in Trent enough, which I would have done, I think, the same thing. I probably would have landed back on Holland as the most conservative choice, but I can't fault you for Jota, and look, you got Holland captaincy points anyway
yeah.
because Jota did not sub
I
on.
mean,
So at
Jota
the end of the day,
not
I think
playing was a 22-point swing for me.
huge.
Huge.
It was an
Yeah.
absolute massive gain. Had he played and gotten a one-pointer, I think your team would be in a lot worse shape for sure.
That being said, my team, I'm pretty sure, is like wholesale different now. I activated my wild card on Sunday.
Yeah.
So, um, I'm glad I'm done kind of with this iteration of the team because it was pretty stressful and nobody really returned that I wanted to. None of my differentials really paid off, right? Kulusevski got the 1 assist. Gordon, I don't think has returned. Maybe he got 1 assist. I can't remember. Havertz had the one good game. You know what I mean? Like it was uh, all these players that I was like, oh, they'll cover X, and they didn't cover X. So yeah, I'm glad this part's over. I mean, we already mentioned that. Like, yeah, I went too big at the back too early. I guess. You I am glad I brought Mazraoui in early though, because I've really benefited from all of his returns. Except for that first week. So I guess there's that.
Well, let's flip over to my team really quick. I finished on 69 points. I captained Salah, who got an assist, 6 points, so 12 there. I had Henderson, 9 pointer.
Yeah,
What a way to go out. That guy has been so fucking
yeah.
bad. He's one of the guys that I could not wait to wild card out. So I was excited to see. It's like we're breaking up, but we can stay
I mean,
friends
both of those
now.
keepers, both Henderson and Onana, were kind of playing on top of their heads on Saturday. I mean, the shots they were stopping were just incredible.
Rogers,
Finally
double
returned.
return. Finally, the 5 million midfielder that a lot of folks started with played this week. And then I think the biggest win for me was I triple moved out Holland and I brought in Solanke, I brought in Palmer, and I brought in Watkins this week. And all three of those guys, 3 returns, they all scored, which never happens in FPL. I gotta say, I'm really enjoying the new transfer buffer. Being able to use 3 free transfers, no hits, and get 3 returns from those guys was great.
It was weird. You mentioned those transfers. I have 3 now, I think. 2 or 3, I can't remember. I think it's 3 though, because when I was trying to do my wild card, it would not let me activate my wild card until I made more than 3 transfers. So, I
Okay.
almost
They're trying to help
dude,
us.
I almost used my free transfers instead of the wild card because I kept hitting the wild card button and I'd go to next and be like, you can't do this. Like, you don't have enough transfers to cover it. And it would deactivate it. So I had to like kind of work through some of that stuff. But yeah, those 2 transfers are definitely a different animal here.
Any other notes, comments on my team? 69 points, which we
We love.
love. Can't beat
Can't
it.
beat it. No, you made the 3 great transfers, Chris.
Thank you. I was 15K on Saturday night. Now it's really stupid to look at your rank
Yeah.
before Holland plays, and he did return, so that knocked me back to like 100K. But overall, still a really great start to the season. I'm hoping to continue to gain ground on the field by playing the wild card this week because I don't have any Arsenal
Yeah.
to
You
use
just
it.
brought up Holland and Arsenal. I mean, can we reflect on that match just a little bit? I mean, what a finish. You know, the last, like, 3 minutes of that game were just pure box office. You know, you see the goal, you saw Holland peg Saliba in the back of the head with the ball, which was just cinema.
Speaking of should have been a red card,
Dude,
that should have been a red
was that
card.
not crazy? How did he do that? He then fully, like, lowered his shoulder into Thomas Partey the very next instance, and then at halftime or at full time, he's barking in the face of Gabriel and Arteta and Ben White. I mean, surely one of those 3 instances warranted a yellow card, if not, like you mentioned, a red card. Um, Not that Thomas Partey didn't deserve some punishment there after what he did to Rodri, but, you know, yeah, what a wild ending to that match. I mean, you got the minus points for Arsenal defenders who conceded 2 goals, right? And then obviously anyone who owns a guy that got red carded, he got minus points for because of he got the red card too, right? Can't forget Trossard.
Yeah,
Can't
trust.
Trossard, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't forget that cheeky little rule. So kind of a crazy ending FPL wise and Premier League wise.
Yeah. Do you feel like the result was fair? Like card wise, throw that out the
Yeah.
window. Do you feel like similar to the last couple seasons, these two teams are evenly matched, or were you more impressed with one side or the other?
I It's not that I was more impressed with one side of the other or the other. I was pretty disappointed in how Arsenal like set up and went about the match. You know, their whole like stick before all the stuff on Twitter before the match was, oh, Arsenal are going to pack the bus. They're going to pack the bus. They're going to pack the bus. And then obviously Trossard gets sent off in the second half. They complete 2 passes in the opposition half, the entire half. They had 2% possession. Kai Havertz and Julian Timber did not complete a pass the entire game. They're the
Incredible.
first 2 outfield players to never do that or to ever do that, which is just insane to me. And I think it speaks to how Arsenal and Arteta went about the game. You know, I even saw on Twitter today that there was a group of Premier League uh, teams who went to PGMOL and said that they had some real questions about how Arsenal were conducting themselves throughout their matches and all the time wasting tactics, and that they need to look more into this. So pretty pretty interesting. I mean, was it fair? Yeah, probably. I mean, if you're Man City, who's this behemoth of a team, and you can't break down a low block up a man for 45 minutes, I know it's hard when people pack the bus, right? There are a lot of bodies around, but they surely didn't deserve the win, I don't think. But I think a draw is probably fair. But like I said, it's a pretty boring match as far as the way
Yeah,
Arsenal
they
went about it.
I think that they need Foden back sooner rather than later, especially with the news that Rodri
Yeah.
has torn his ACL, not because Foden and Rodri play the same position, but Rodri does, even as a defensive midfielder, help them quite a bit in terms of breaking down defenses. And I felt like when Foden was not on the field, they were missing a little bit of creativity in the final third too. Kind of get through the block that Arsenal had set up. On the flip side, the goal in the first half when it was 11-11, where that Holland scored
Mhm.
for City, I have never seen Gabriel and Saliba do anything like that. I mean, that was like Moses parting the Red Sea. Holland, it seemed like just kind of walked through both of the center backs to score that goal. So, as good as Arsenal have been to start the season, that just seemed like such a strange error from their back line to make, especially so early on in such a big match.
Yeah. Oh. Do we ever realize why Foden wasn't is he injured? Is he sick? What's his just to address the Foden piece first, because he did come on towards the end, but, there was no KDB either that match, so they struggled for that creative attacker, which they both kind of fit that role. Do we know why Foden hasn't been playing? Is it a minutes thing with Arteta? I know he was ill last week, but has that just carried on or
Yeah, so he's back. He started in their
Yeah,
EFL Cup game
which they
today
barely squeaked
as the
by the
9th.
win. It was 2-1, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they beat Watford 2-1. So I think for all intents and
he's
purposes, he's
back. Okay.
back. But yeah, who knows? I think it's a combination of like rest, injury, and
Yeah.
illness, given that he was at the Euros and played quite a bit. And City are one of the few teams that have that luxury, even if they have one of the best players in the world, they don't really miss much by having him sit out 4 wins and
Yeah.
1 draw against Arsenal. But they will need him coming up.
Yeah, Foden back would be good for all of FPL, I think. He'd be nice to have as an option for an asset here, when City's fixtures turn also, just because, last season he was so good to sniff out a goal when they needed one. So you'd hope to think he can carry that on into this season. But, I mean, outside of Holland, are there any even other City assets that we want to own? Because Guardiola did not work out for me.
Yeah. Why don't we save that for the wild card conversation? Is there anything else from this weekend set of matches or from your team or from my team that we should take away before we move on to the wild card talk?
Kulusevski was a pipe dream for me. I really thought he'd pay off. Now watch him just go to town here after he leaves my team in these next couple of fixtures, because he's got United this game week, then Brighton, then West Ham. So totally possible. But I think I've got to call time on my Kulusevski experiment.
Well, it depends what is your goal, because I would say if you can keep Kulisevsky for 38 weeks and finish inside the top million, that's a successful
Yeah.
FPL season.
He's
Sort
dropped
of what
price twice. He's at 6.3 now.
yeah, yeah, maybe time to move
Oh, I
on.
already
I
have.
agree.
And then the Eze thing, Chris, I just can't figure out what the deal there is. He was so good last season, and maybe is he just not as effective without Elise to partner with him? Has he not found his Bash brother that he needs to partner with here? Because I mean, he's had the one return in say 5 game weeks.
Yeah, one return, still creating a lot in terms of XG and XA and his underlying numbers. I think one thing I like for him is that a lot of the midfielders will trend towards more assist creation
Mhm.
than more goal creation, and he actually is still very much creating expected goals, which are worth more points for midfielders. Feel like he's been unlucky, similar to Bruno Fernandez, but I would not fault anybody from going away from those guys on wildcard this week. It's really a question of trade offs. Like I think one thing in my team is if I want a second premium mid instead of Eze, so like a Palmer or something like that, it becomes very, very difficult to have a guy like Trent. So if you're looking at the delta between Eze Palmer and Trent versus 4 or 5 defender, I think that's a conversation. But I still think in isolation, for me, I'm still very comfortable having Eze in my team. And I think he's like certainly in the possible category. Let's say goodbye to the first 5 game weeks of the season then and move on to wildcard game week 6. Jason and I both have the wildcard chip activated. Before we kick off the wildcard discussion in terms of picks and teams, I am curious what would be your reasons or situations in which you would not play the wild card this week? What would your team have to look like for managers listening to say, you know what, maybe I actually don't need to wild card this week?
If you had strong Arsenal coverage already in your team, like a Saka and at
Yep.
least a defender, and you're comfortable with the other assets you had, like a Trent in defense, right, or in a Holland, and you didn't need to like make wholesale changes to bring in one of those premiums you were lacking. I think you're fine to not wild card and see it
Yeah.
out. Arsenal are the team everybody's going to target for their fixture run, just because they've got 3 great fixtures, right? 2 promoted sides in Bournemouth, um, and the first 2 against the promoted sides are home. So everyone's going to target those assets. So if you've got good Arsenal coverage, and you're okay with the premiums that you've already got, I think you're fine to hold off. That's kind of the only point I would think of. Obviously, if you used your wild card already, you can't wild card. But if you did use your wild card already, I certainly suggest using some of those transfers you saved up to get some Arsenal players in your team.
Cool.
What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. Arsenal coverage first and foremost. If you have 0 Arsenal or potentially 1 Arsenal, this is the week to play the wild card to get 3 Arsenal for their upcoming fixture run. Now, you and I avoided Arsenal to start the season because they had bad fixtures. Lo and behold,
That's n-
they
that's
returned
not
pretty
true.
much every
Don't
week.
don't don't forget. I started out with Ben White and Kai Havertz.
That's true. Okay, I should say I
Yeah,
avoided Arsenal because they had a tough fixture run to start the season, and they returned most weeks. Saka has returned every week. The defense has returned 4 out of 5 weeks, and Gabriel, I think, has still returned
two
regardless.
goals.
Um, yeah, 2 goals for Gabriel. So some managers might already have Arsenal, and I think if you do, you're celebrating that they scored a lot of points despite the fixture run, and you hang on to them. And I think you can play the wild card later after they get through the run of 3 really good fixtures they have. They do have some slightly tougher fixtures beyond that point, so that would be a good opportunity. The other player that I think is interesting is if you don't have Bumo,
Yeah.
I feel like he is solidly one of the midfield picks on
Yep.
wildcard this week. And if you can't get to him easily, plus you have the Arsenal issues, I think that would be a good case to wildcard. And then lastly, if you have a guy like Isak, whose fixtures turn, he has not been that good. If you have Muniz, who's no longer starting for Fulham, if you have injuries, if you've lost a lot of bench coverage, I think all of those factors play into it. But like certainly Arsenal and Bumo are probably the top 2 for me. Does that kind of ring true for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of listed off um, a lot of the factors that I considered when picking this first draft of the wild card, right? The only other thing I'll mention is the Chelsea experiment. I actively avoided Chelsea. You did not. You had Nkunku. Um, but I was avoiding those assets because I didn't know how that was going to play out. And it actually turns out they might be a pretty good football squad this season. So
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of managers followed suit with that or not, but they've got some key assets that are still low owned outside of Palmer and Kunku, that I think are good to target as long as you're okay risking the rotation game because they have so many damn players that it's going to be tough to be confident who's starting every game week.
Yeah. Certainly none of the wingers,
Yeah,
but we know Palmer is not playing in conference league, for example. He could be a great pick on wild card. I'm with you. I think after 5 weeks, there are definitely 3 teams that are better than Chelsea, but I'm not sure that there's
yeah,
4. And their assets, especially in defense and Palmer, I think are priced to buy as the 4th best team. So we'll definitely chat about
yeah.
those as well. All right, let's start with forwards. So each time that Jason and I have an opportunity to give out a wild card team or a free hit team, what have you, we go position group by position group and essentially cover who is a lock for the team, should be in every draft, who is a possible for the team, could be included in some teams and not in others, and who are your quote, you should but you couldn't players, which was originally named after Nico Jackson from Chelsea. I think we're gonna have to
Dude,
find a new name because the guy's been
I've got
unbelievable
him
to
in my
start the
draft,
season.
so it's a real eating crow moment here for me.
Maybe it's he's now a you could and maybe you
Yeah,
should.
yeah,
Um, but anyway, this last set of players will be kind of the quote unquote puntier players of the group. So why don't we start with the forwards? I have one lock for forward, that is Erling
yeah.
Haaland. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree. One lock, a lot of possibles here though in the forward spot. I feel like there's a lot of interchange and customization you can do with those other two spots.
Is there a reasonable no Holland case
No,
for this wild
no,
card
no,
draft? There
no,
none
no,
whatsoever.
because he's
I
got
I agree.
Newcastle away, which is the toughest fixture in the next three. Because after that, he's got Fulham at home and Wolves away. Both of those defenses have failed to keep a clean sheet this season. So yeah, I mean, even, Newcastle's red. I don't know that I would make it maybe more yellow at this point. Just because, I mean, his last three returns 17, 13, 9 against Arsenal, right? And it wasn't even when they were down. So I don't know how you can reasonably say I don't want Erling Holland in my wild card this week.
Yeah. 10 goals in 5 games seems good. I think just basic math.
Basic
I feel
math.
like he's a
Yeah.
good
No,
player.
I'm with you.
All right, now possibles, you mentioned a lot of guys in this tier, so I'll give you my mid-price possibles were Ollie Watkins, Kai Havertz, Nick Jackson, and Dom Solanke. Let's stop there. Anybody else in the mid-price tier that you were looking at, or any of those guys that you especially like?
What do you count mid price? Are we
Let's 7 million and
okay?
above.
No, I'm with you. I think those are really it for me. I mean, even Isak, he's got City next, Everton after that, Brighton after that,
Let's talk about Kai.
Kyle.
I'm a little worried about Kai. Odegaard's out for Arsenal, so I think he's doing a lot of work in the
Until
midfield
October, at least. Yeah, or
until
until the
October.
international break in October is what Arteta said. I should rephrase.
Arsenal have Europe as well,
Mhm.
and Havertz also played for Germany over the summer. I think one of their Champions League games is against PSG, which is not an easy game for them. My initial draft, like 2 weeks ago, I was like Kai was
You
100%
were
in
high on Kai.
and high on Kai. And now I'm really struggling because of the expected minutes. Like, I think of the popular Arsenal assets, he might be the most likely to get rotated. How are you feeling about
I'm
him?
with you, and not even so much from the rotation point of view, Chris, but from the positional point of view. With Odegaard out, Kai has to play a lot more in the midfield. He can't play that true striker role that we want him to play when we're owning a forward asset. So to me, that's why I'm out on Kai. He easily could have returned against City, right? He had a couple opportunities that he ducked, but I just haven't seen the service or the potential there that warrants keeping him at $8.1 million. You know what I mean? Like I thought he could cover Saka, but I'd much rather just spend the extra 1.9 and go with Saka as my Arsenal premium and maybe replace Kai with like a Chris Wood or something like that. I'm just not feeling the Kai.
Now, you did say you had Nick Jackson in your team. Can you talk to me about him and kind of what you're seeing from a team structure standpoint? I'm really surprised to hear him over Solanke actually for that spot.
Yeah, well, I'm really upset at the Tottenham players right now. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to jinx Solanke. I'm glad he got the goal at the weekend, but I mean, your grandma could have scored that goal, Chris. So, I don't know. That's just I went with Nick Jackson because I have not seen a confident Chelsea move like I saw his first 2 goals at the weekend. And that instilled me with a lot of belief in that, okay, Chelsea do know how to play and Nick Jackson's going to be their target guy. So let him cook. But after seeing Nkunku score that hat trick, granted, it was against like a League One opponent. So not that we don't need to, overblow this, but my only concern with Jackson is the playing time. Is he going to be a 50-minute type guy? And then an Nkunku or someone else is going to come in and play the next 40 minutes, right? And if Jackson can score in that time period too every time, that's great. I don't need him to play the full 90, but I don't know that that's going to happen every game week. So that's my hesitation on Jackson is the minutes risk with all the Chelsea players. Even Palmer got yanked relatively early in the game at the weekend, right? He got his goal, he got off the field.
Yeah, I do think it does seem like Maresca sees Jackson as the number 9 that gets in
Hmm.
behind, and Nkunku as the number 9 that plays the false 9, and they do have it set up where Nkunku is playing all the cup and European games, and Jackson is playing all the league games, so I actually feel good from a minutes
Okay.
standpoint. I was more surprised from a fixture standpoint. So Chelsea have Brighton and Nottingham Forest at home upcoming, which have been actually 2 of the better defenses in the league outside of the top teams. And then they have a little bit tougher fixture run away to Liverpool, home to Newcastle, away to Man United, and home to
Yeah.
Arsenal. Whereas I think Solanke might have some better near term
Sure.
fixtures. But I also understand not wanting to jinx your own team
Yeah.
as well if that's the reason to keep him out.
Well, I think Brighton and Nottingham Forest are probably overperforming a bit at the beginning of this season. Even at the game at the weekend, we saw them both concede 2 goals and 2 pretty standard goals. I mean, I guess the one was a penalty, right? Another really deft finish from outside the box. But I think, especially with the Gibbs White red card and both teams or both managers being sent off. I don't know. I think we're starting to see maybe some kinks in the armor. So I'm not scared of the Brighton and Nottingham Forest fixtures. They're both at home. I guess Chelsea have struggled, I guess, to perform at home recently, but with this new form that they found, I'm a believer. I think he can return. Like I said, this is the first draft, so I could easily be talked out of Nick Jackson and into Solanke. It would certainly save me 0.2 million, which I can then go
Yeah.
reinvest when I want to upgrade Saka to Salah later on, or one of my other midfielders. But yeah, I don't know. The United picture scares me. Solanke's also playing Brighton in game week 7, so you got to cancel those 2
Hmm.
pictures out, and then Solanke's got game week 8 Watford. So I could see a scenario where,
Watford.
or sorry, not Watford, West Ham. I got Watford on my
What,
mind. They almost beat Man
what a
City. Yeah, that
fixture.
would have been awesome.
Yeah, you got to triple up on Spurs
Yeah.
for that one.
Well, you know what I mean. Like I could start with Nick Jackson and then downgrade him to Solanke and get the Brighton and West Ham fixtures and in the future fixtures for Solanke as well. So there's some flexibility there, but um, that was my starting draft, and recency bias, of course, always plays
Yeah.
into effect. I've got Wood in that third striker role. Not right now. I mean, I have him as an asset. In that third striker role in the 6.1 million, um, as my third playing striker. So I plan on going with um, the 3-4-3 formation. So
Yeah. I think the other thing with Brighton and Forest is the defensive numbers are also a function of who they've
yeah,
played so far. And Brighton also had a lot of red card minutes against
yep,
Arsenal. So I think both teams' defensive prowess is probably slightly overstated. I think it's just how much do you buy Chelsea, especially for the 2 home fixtures, versus how much do you buy that Brighton and Nottingham Forest are actually pretty decent. This year, it's probably somewhere in the middle of those 2, and I would definitely not criticize you for picking Nick Jackson. I think he's certainly in the possible group. I was just surprised from the Spurs guy that Solanke was
From the
not
whole
in
time
that
we've been podcasting,
price
yeah,
bracket.
I'm equally surprised with myself, Chris.
You mentioned Chris
Yep.
Wood. The possibles that I had in the cheap tier were Chris Wood and TCL. I did not have any other
Not
forwards
João
kind of in
Pedro?
that price bracket. John Pedro, I had him and Welbeck actually in the you could but you
Okay.
shouldn't, kind of the punts, specifically because he's been
Yeah.
rotated in and out of the lineup. I think Welbeck is probably also on a short leash
Yeah.
a little bit as well. The other two guys I had were Jimenez from Fulham. I wouldn't go there because if he doesn't score, Muniz can easily come back in, but he's been returning. And Strand Larson from Wolves is probably the best guy in the 5-5 price bracket. I would try and stretch your budget up to DCL or Chris
Yeah.
Wood if you can. But I think he's a guy you could consider if you don't have to play him. Wolves fixtures do get better after a little bit, so you'd have to bench him for a while, but he is a possible
We
pick.
had a bit of debate on Wood and DCL. What's your argument for one or the other? I said, maybe DCL has a little more legs in him in the Everton team. He's in good recent form, but we do think Wood might be on penalties now since he stepped up to take that one for Nottingham Forest over Gibbs White. So give me your elevator pitch for which of those two you would pick and why.
Well, we did a Twitter
I know.
poll on this
Yeah.
actually this week, and we got uh, some great feedback. So, which forward do you want on a Game Week 6 wild card? 55% of people selected DCL, 35% selected Chris Wood, and 10% selected both. And I actually have both right now as
Really?
well in my
In your
team.
draft?
Yeah.
Without no
I
Holland?
think I
Oh,
with
with
Holland. Yep. Holland, DCL, and Chris Wood. Here's the thing. I think DCL's long-term fixtures are a little bit better.
okay.
I think Nottingham Forest is probably the slightly better team. Both guys are on penalties. Both guys through last season and to start this season have pretty good non-penalty XG per 90 numbers. I think they're both like very reasonable picks. And to your point, if based on the guys I have, I just can't justify a 7-5 Solanke or Jackson. So I think of this tier, these are the clear front runners. So I don't know if it's a one versus the other. Like I said, I think Everton's fixtures are just a little bit better for a little bit longer.
Okay. I think that's fair. It's just you
Yeah,
gotta bank on Everton not Evertoning, which they have not yet figured out how to do.
they're at least scoring goals
That's true.
this season. It's the defensively has been the issue.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to midfielders. Locks. I have two players in this group, Saka and Mbumo. You have anybody else in your group?
Nope. Those are the 2
Okay.
in my team.
Yeah. Saka is, I think, even more of a no-brainer than
Yeah.
Holland, actually, in this
With
wild
the
card, and
fixture run
Mbumo
coming
coming.
up,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep. Should be in every
Should be
team.
captained.
Uh, Possibles within the premium tier, I have Salah, Palmer, Son, and Foden. Foden, I think, is interesting at 9.3 million because he does unlock some other picks for you. The problem is we just haven't seen him play in the
Exactly.
league yet. It's just a little bit too early to go there, in my
The
opinion.
rest, I think, are too expensive to pull in your team right now. If you've got Salah and you wanna stick with him, I can see that as long as you can still afford Saka and Holland, good for you, but
Check. Yeah.
I don't know that you can have the assets you want and still own an Arsenal defender, Saka, and Holland and Salah. So that's my only I think that's the same with Palmer too, but maybe that's just my problem. I don't know.
My draft currently is a Holland, Saka, Palmer
Mhm.
draft, but I don't own Trent. That was the
That was a
trade-off to
trade-off.
get the second
Yeah.
premium
And
mid.
we can talk about him in the next section.
Mid-price guys in the possibles group, I had Diaz, Bruno, Madison, which I know you'll love, Jared Bowen, and Eze. Let's say mid-price 7 million and up
Okay.
again. What does your tier look like? I guess Eze is 6.9, but I'm throwing him in
Yeah,
the mid-price
that's
group.
fine. They're all possibles. I mean, none of them are locks, for sure. I like Madison. Diaz, I'm a little concerned with minutes for. He's been playing a lot for Liverpool. He's not really gotten the benefit of any of the early subs or the breaks for the cup games or the European fixtures. So I do see some bench time maybe coming for Diaz. I'll say what I said last time we talked about it. I think you've missed the points already if you didn't have him. I don't know that he's going to keep this up through the whole
I
season.
do too.
So
I don't think he's demonstrably, like,
yeah,
improved. What you could say is that Liverpool has a new manager, and maybe the new style suits his position better, but I don't really think that's the case. I think that Liverpool have just had a great run. He's gotten a lot of minutes, and he was the guy that was on the end of a few chances.
yep, yep. So yeah, outside of that, I've dipped more into the affordable enabler category when it comes to the midfield. And I think you're just kind of a glutton for choices there because you've got so many good options that I've kind of steered away from the premium and expensive midfielders. Again, I would consider Madison. I thought he played really well this past week, got himself a goal, but I just don't know that it's sustainable throughout uh, this season, especially the next couple of games. Again, United, Brighton, West Ham. So I don't know. Uh,
He's getting some buzz, I think, because he is the second, highest player in the league in terms of XG plus XA, or non-penalty XG plus XA. So there are some people starting to look and say, "Wait, is James Maddison a
yeah,
pick?" I don't see it, but I think, again, Spurs' fixtures are pretty decent for a while, other than they play City, I think, in, like, 12. Yeah, he could be in there, but, given his form from last season, to your point, I just don't see him as necessarily a long-term pick. I think he's just had a good fixture run here.
yeah, yeah,
Who are the cheaper kind of mids in your possibles group?
yeah. I mean, Semenyo is high up there for me. I really like the way he's been playing, and he's got Southampton at home next. Smith Rowe, who's been returning a bit more than maybe we thought he would, and obviously Rogers, who finally came good and met the underlying numbers with some conversion. So those are kind of the three that I say are the most possible, if you will, of this tier. Certainly the ones that I'm highly considering for my um, for my team. You could include potentially Harvey Barnes in that group. The only issue is he plays Man City at home next, and again Everton and Brighton after that, and there's a minutes risk there also that you got to
Sure.
watch out for. Um, but those are kind of the ones that I saw in that category that I think you really need to consider having, and they enable you to do so much more too. If you're not going to invest in a Palmer Salah third premium there in the attack,
The only other guy I have in that group is Dwight McNeil, who I
Shite
think we
McNeil.
disagree. I know that we disagree on, but I think he is a reasonable wild card pick. But for this wild card, actually, I almost put Semenyo in the lock tier. The only reason I didn't is because, like you said, there's a lot of
Yeah,
alternatives. If somebody went Smith Rowe and Rogers, like, completely
yeah, and
fine.
he
But
does have
Semenyo's
Arsenal
next couple of
in
fixtures,
in 3 weeks, so it's
yeah.
something you got to consider. Granted, he could probably sniff out a goal in that match because he's that type of player. Was unlucky to not get the goal this weekend that he scored against Liverpool because of the offsides.
Yeah, and underlying numbers kind of support his output as well. He's been pretty consistent
Yeah,
to start the season. Any punts in midfield? I had Martinelli and Trossard actually for Arsenal.
I also
If
had
for
Trossard.
some reason, yeah, for some reason that you don't want to double up in defense and you don't want Kai, like Martinelli for 3 game weeks or Trossard for 3 game weeks, I think you could potentially go there. I would not, but that's why they're
I was
punts.
talking to my brother Rye, who wild carded last week, and you know, I was saying, "Hey, this is a good wild card, but you need Arsenal coverage. Here's what you can do with the team you've got. Targeting a defender, and maybe you can't get to Saka, but I think Trossard is a really good option." And then he goes, gets sent off, so maybe not the best option to go with. if you're on a wild card this week. I think his text to
Yeah,
me,
I guess I take
yeah,
Trossard off the list
right.
after the red card. So Martinelli really
But Martinelli
would be
hasn't
the
had a
guy.
goal contribution in almost a year. So
He hasn't been great, but yeah, I mean that's why it's the you could
yeah.
but you
Yeah,
shouldn't. Like
no, no,
he
no,
is
that's
starting.
fair. So that was my argument for Trossard over Martinelli is I think
Yeah,
Trossard
fair.
could start on the bench, play 15 minutes and still sniff out a goal. Whereas Martinelli, like I said, the performance just hasn't been there. But Trossard might be a 2 to 3 week move. You know, he's definitely not one I would go with right now, considering that he's suspended for the next match.
Yeah. Let's move on to defenders. I kind of cheated. I have two locks, but it's really it's two positional locks that could be multiple players.
Okay.
Um, Number one is Gabriel or Saliba.
Yeah.
I think is a lock. You should have at least one. And number two is a starting 4.0 defender that I actually do want to talk to you about because I was trying to
Interesting.
figure out who the best 4.0 defender was. I had Sepp Vandenberg from Brentford in my team for a while, and just like looking at Reddit and Brentford fans, he's not in their back four when they start four
Right.
at the
He's more of a
back.
back
So
three guy, right?
yeah, and they play back three when they play tougher opponents. So not in the fixtures that I want him for, or
Right.
would rotate him in for. So I'm thinking about Greaves from Ipswich as my 4.0. I don't know that I would go there if you're also bringing in Leaf
Right.
Davis, but I think he's the best 4.0 defender given the fixtures for Ipswich, but I actually am not sure who the consensus best 4.0 is.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, you've got Harwood Bellis from Southampton who was unlucky to concede that goal in like the 98th minute or whatever in their match and lose that clean sheet because they almost had their first one, right? But he has some challenging fixtures upcoming, right? You've got Bournemouth away, Arsenal away, but then you got Leicester home. So if you can bench him for the first two and then bring him on for the third, I think that's fine. But I think you're right. I think even listening to the other podcast, Greaves was kind of the consensus 4.0 that you wanted in your team. Now, that being said, do you want the Leicester 4.0 defender in your team? I don't know. I mean, have they kept a clean sheet yet?
Face? Are you talking about
Or
Greaves from
yeah,
Ipswich,
sorry.
and then Wout
Faze
Faes
for
is from
Leicester, Grease
Leicester?
from Ipswich. Same applies though. Same rationale applies. That's kind of where I'm
Yeah,
at
they did keep it clean at Brighton. They were
at
very
Brighton.
lucky to do
Yeah,
so, and supposedly he's also been a threat on set
yeah.
pieces. It seems like there are somehow less 4.0 options this year to take into consideration than in years past.
Less that we could convince ourselves were a good idea, I would say, because we had,
Yeah.
we had uh what's his name from Luton Town last season who we thought was just gonna haul, and he did have some good runs.
But that
But
was
yeah,
Doughty,
Doughty,
and he
thank
was
you. Yeah,
4.5. He was basically Leaf
okay.
Davis. But, like, yeah, 4.0, it felt like we had more like, Kabore was 4.0. There was somebody else, I can't remember. Maybe it's too early.
Yeah,
Not enough people have been injured yet, and then as soon as somebody goes down, 4.0 starts, we're like, "Great."
yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's fair. So what's your rationale for a starting 4.0 defender? I mean, is that one where what like to enable everything else to happen in your
Yeah.
team? Is that's it? You don't wanna actually play him?
No, you
Okay,
wouldn't play them, but I think
gotcha.
if you are on Wildcard, you or building a team from
Sure.
scratch that is not a free hit team or a bench boost team, you should basically always have a 4.0 defender in the team.
Yeah, I think that's fair
Yeah.
logic. So Gabrielle or Saliba, not both.
I think Gabriel or Saliba is a lock, and then the other one is in the possible
Okay.
tier. So you could have Saka, Gabriel, or Saliba and Havertz, or you could double up, right? It's three Arsenal, however you want to configure it. I think you should just have one. And given the fixtures, I think it should be a center back. I don't think it should be Ben White. I don't think it should be Timber. I don't think it should be Calafiori. I think it has to be one of those two guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's too much rotation risk with the others, and Timber not completing a single pass, I think does give you maybe cause for concern
Sure.
a bit. But I'm on Gabrielle stan at the moment. I think that's who.
Same.
Okay. I think that's pretty.
What is he
Yeah.
80% owned next
He
week? I
he
mean, his ownership is gonna be
he's
insane.
he's only 18.7% owned right now. Can you believe that?
He's gonna be a lot
Yeah.
higher. He's gonna be a
So
lot
that
higher
he was
next
the
week.
one I wanted to get in before the price rises started to come, right? Because he's at I think he's at 6-1 now, and I wanted to get him before, that first rise, like, Ryan mentioned missing out on that. So I pulled the trigger early on
Yeah.
him. And I wanted to keep Trent. I think he's got decent fixtures. Wolves, Crystal Palace, Chelsea at home, and he finally came back with the double haul this game week. So trending in the right direction, trenting in the right direction, I think. Um, so he's who I've got. And then with the other two spots, I kept Mazarawi because I like the way he's been playing. Um, and I pulled in Hardwood Bellis from Southampton and Van de Ven from Tottenham at 4.5. Now, that's a passion pick. Another Tottenham experiment, if you will. I would love to be talked out of Mickey Van de Ven at 4.5, Chris.
Yeah, I think Trent makes a lot of sense. The other possibles I had in the premium tier were Robertson, I think is actually still a fine pick. What do you think about Poro at 5.5?
He's just
The last couple of fixtures have been tough for
well,
them,
if you
but
saw
he
what
looked great for the first 2
you
weeks.
want me to walk you through what happened? Yeah,
Sure.
let me get out my chalkboard. So instead of playing with two sixes, we played with two eights, right? So depending on where the ball was, Madison went out wider, right, to effectuate the play. Kulusevski went the other way, which took up the spots for Pedro Porro and for Udogi to invert completely and get into that forward role. So that's why you're seeing a lot less influence from both of those two in this game because they didn't have the space to go into that into those positions. So Ange just slightly adjusted his approach with the way that we went out at least the last game week, and I think he's probably going to do it moving forward because it worked pretty well for the most part. So I think Pedro Porro is a little less attractive now if that's how we're going to play, just because he's not going to get the ball in those high areas where he can have those bullet shots or hit in those nice crosses, right? A lot of the crosses were coming from Kulusevski, Madison, um, Brennan Johnson, right? Johnson took up a lot of that space on the wing and he got all the benefit from it. So I think that's why I'm out on Pedro Porro, but I still wanted some Tottenham representation in the team.
Fair enough. Is do you think that has been the influence on Madison's numbers? I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
the second highest
absolutely.
non-penalty XG XA is not a 1 week thing, but is he a guy that you believe in long term based on this change?
If it's a change that he's going to make consistently, and that's the new strategy I'm in. But I think you saw several weeks before Madison trying to get up the field, and he couldn't, right? Because you had Pedro Porro and Udogi already in those spots, so there was really nowhere for him to go when he had the ball, right? He had to dish it or swing it out and move it along. There was nowhere for him to go and take up that space. So that's why I think you're seeing a little bit of a Madison resurgence. He's got a little more space to be creative with the ball now. So I'm with you. If it's Madison in those positions instead of Pedro Porro, I think he's fair game for sure.
All right. Yeah, nobody else really in the premium defender tier. Ben White is out because he didn't play against City, has a niggle, and Gavard, we talked about like City defender, maybe some issues there. The 4-5 bracket where you have Van de Ven, I also have Colwell from Chelsea. If you're high on them, I think he's easily the best defensive pick there. Leaf Davis, Konsa from Villa, Pinnock from Brentford, or Collins in the central defense. You mentioned Manchester United. Martinez is 4.5. Mazraoui is 4.6. Mazraoui right there has been
Did you
pretty good.
see the tackle from Martinez at Crystal Palace?
Yeah, where he jumped 2 feet
How
first
is that
into
not
Haaland's
intent
guy.
to do damage? I mean, come on, that's got to be a
It
card
was
for me.
it was strange.
I mean,
I have no idea
it
what
looked like
he
he
was
wanted to end
doing, but
somebody's career.
yeah. Yeah, it was definitely dangerous. But as a 4.5 defender playing for Manchester
Yeah.
United, still a good FPL pick. Agree with you on Mazraoui. Anthony Robinson, I think, is very much still a pick for
Yeah.
Fulham. Aina from
Hmm.
Forest is actually who I have in the 4-5 slot
Interesting.
right now.
Okay.
Uh, Decent assist numbers, started every game. Forest defense seems to be pretty good, so he was the guy I landed on. Max Kilman from West Ham, they look terrible, but
They
their
do
fixtures do
not.
get better.
They do not look promising at all.
Yeah. And Rico Lewis I have
Yeah.
in this tier as well. With Rodri out, I Kovacic is the direct replacement, but, like, maybe Rico Lewis gets a few more minutes. The problem is what you really want is for him to play 90 or play
Yeah.
0, and he's had a couple appearances where he's played a half, which is a problem, I think, for owning him. And he's only averaging, like, 2 points a match.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think of those, I like Mazraoui the best, just because of the way
Yeah.
he gets forward more than the other, obviously more than Martinez, right? But I think he just looks the part a bit better from the eye test. I like Rico Lewis too, but I think he's the minutes risk in both ways. There, I don't know that the consistency is going to be there between all of Man City's uh, different matches that they're playing in. That's going to be tough. I did look at the Nottingham Forest defender as well, because he's up there. But it's again one of those questions you got to ask: is it something that's going to be consistent, or are we going to see some more, um, some more chinks in the armor after this matchup with Brighton? I wasn't convinced. Not saying he's any better or worse of a pick than Van de Ven, but um, I'm just not sold on the Nottingham Forest project quite yet.
If I look at the top projected
Mhm.
points for defenders 5 million or less between game week 6, why don't we say maybe like game week 6 to game week 12 would be a pretty reasonable amount of time to keep a 4 or 5 defender. The top guys are Dallo, Udogi, Pinnock, Delict, Colwell, Munoz, Konsa, Martinez, Davis. Robinson's kind of in there. So it's a lot of Manchester United kind of in the near term because they have a strong game week 11 fixture, and then Spurs have a strong game week 8 and game week 11 fixture. But it's a lot of the guys we mentioned. I don't think there's a clear winner in this particular uh, group that I'm seeing
And
anyway.
I think the 4.5 bracket gives you some license to take risk, go for a differential too. Like you said, there's a lot of options out there. Um, some of them, like I said, Udogi's like 5.5, right? So not I wouldn't say he's really in the same bracket as the 4.5 defenders because that 1 million is really important. Maybe not right in this team, but when you want to bring some of the more premiums back in, if you want to upgrade Saka to Salah down the road, right, you're going to need some of that money in the bank where you can get it. So that's just kind of my thought process here with the defenders. But what about keepers? What are your thoughts on keepers?
I have no locks
No locks.
on
Yeah.
goalkeepers. I don't think there's a consensus. But I do have, I think maybe for the first time ever, premium keepers in my possibles. I think Raya and Allison are actually very
Dude,
viable wild card
R-
keeper picks. What about you?
Raya is one of the best keepers I've seen in a long time. These
Yeah.
last couple matches, like Arsenal have not lost because of Raya. You know what I mean? Like some of the saves he's made have just been incredible. The double saves he's made. I mean, he had two in as many weeks last week. It's crazy. Um, so I'm with you. I don't know that there are any locks. It's really kind of where you want to play at and what kind of budget you've got, right? Like right now, I've got Flecken and Sanchez in my slots. So you talk about the Chelsea defense. Sanchez might be an easy way to dip your toe in there without committing too hard um, into that Chelsea defense. And I think Flecken has got some really good fixtures, right? West Ham at home, Wolves at home in the near future. And he's not kept a clean sheet. Brentford have not kept a clean sheet recently. They just played Spurs and City. So I think there's some potential there. for him to get some points. But if my only cause for not going to a Raya, who is the one I would really want, is the budget piece. Like, I really think I need at least 2.5 million in the bank to make way for some other changes down the road without needing like 3 or 4 transfers to get somebody in or out. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my thought process there. But if budget wasn't a concern, Raya would definitely be my goalkeeper. I mean, Arsenal's
Yeah.
numbers speak for themselves there.
5.6 million is a lot. At the same time, he's got 6 bonus points this year in 5 matches. Like, there are not too many keepers who can do that. Whatever changes they made to BPS, it sounds like it is benefiting him. So yeah, it's reasonable. It's just it's a lot of money for keeper. I agree with you on Flecken. He's my wild card goalkeeper right now. I also had Ariola, Verbruggen, and Sells as the other 4 or 5 keepers that I would entertain. I think Sanchez is in there. Did he go up to
He did go
4.6?
up to 4.6.
Yeah, see, I'd rather have Colwell at 4.5 than Sanchez
Yeah,
at four
saves the
six
point one.
personally. Yeah, if you like Chelsea's defense,
Is
I don't
Colwell
think
gonna
it's a
start every week though?
I
You
think
think
so.
so?
I think
I
he's
think that
nailed.
was my
Yeah.
only concern with the Chelsea defender is I didn't know who to go for and who was nailed. So
Yeah. I think Colwell and Kukurea will start pretty much
I
every
could
game.
not own Cucurella in good faith. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, he's 5 million, so you
Yeah, it's
wouldn't want
true.
to, and he's kind of the defensive left
Yeah.
back. Um, but yeah, I mean, Gusto's still out, so you have kind of like Fofana and Disasi and Tosin that compete for the other center back spot and right back right now. But I think Colwell and Kukurea are very
Okay.
safe. I also had there are some 4.4 keepers, Murich, Johnstone, and Ramsdale. If you are really pressed for budget, those are guys you could consider as your second keeper. Are you getting a 4.0 or are you getting another 4.5 keeper? I was torn on that as well.
Yeah, I think having I don't know. Right now I have two playing 4.5 keepers. I've got Flecken and Sanchez, like I said. So Sanchez would be the one to go, as I'm less convinced of the Chelsea goalkeeper, and like you said, he's 4.6. But part of me, I think I don't know is the answer. I really don't because I think if you're gonna go for a cheap keeper, then you might as well go for one who's super cheap, right? That you can save the budget on and just never plan on playing, and just stick with what you will. We even mentioned at the postmortem last season that your goalkeeper is not going to score you like all your points. It's much less important to have like a high scoring goalkeeper than it is elsewhere on the pitch. So I think you kind of either go all in or all out there with that second one.
Yeah. I think if I was in a room with like the top 100 FPL players ever, and I was like, I'm wild carding, I have a 4 or 5 keeper, what should I do with my second keeper? I think all 100 of them would say 4.0
Yeah,
backup
yeah,
keeper. But I feel like I am leaning towards a second keeper based on how my team's set up. There's just not much I can get for an extra point 0.5 anywhere
hmm
else. And rather than putting in the bank, I think locking down goalkeeper such that I don't have to make any transfers there until the next
wild
wild
card.
card, even if there is an injury. Like, this is a much longer stretch between game weeks 1 and game week 5. We're going to be game week 6 at least through game week 20 before you can play wild card 2. I think it might be worth an investment. Now, if you can get somebody like Trent with an extra point 0.5, you should do that. But
Yeah,
when I was looking at my team, there was nobody that I really felt like was a must have that I could do with that budget. So I feel like I'm doing something not optimal, so to speak, but something that gives me a little more peace of mind for the rest of season, I guess.
if I had Raya, I would definitely go with the 4.0.
Oh,
You
of
know what I mean?
course.
I think
Yeah.
that's the cheapest possible goalkeeper you can get. Is there anyone cheaper than 4.0?
Well, you could do Allison 5.0 and a 4.0, which would
Yeah.
essentially be the same price as two 4.5s, but I don't know that I want to lock in a Liverpool spot, and Kanate is right there for 5 million
And
too,
that's kind of where
as
I'm
a
at.
defensive
Yeah,
option.
it's a good point, with the Arsenal piece too, because, um, I don't or not Arsenal. Yeah, Arsenal. Like, I don't know that I wanna lock in that spot either, right, with the goalkeeper because, you never know what's gonna happen when Odegaard comes back and you wanna go back up to Trossard. It'd be a lot harder to get the goalkeeper out and bring him in, but like you said, that's, 5.6 is Raya right now, right? So you can drop your second spot into the cheapest price goalie. So you got a 4.0 in I don't know, who is the best 4.0 you'd go with here, Chris? There's a Ward from Leicester.
I don't think there really
You
is
don't think
one
so?
this season. I would just say whoever
Ward Judd
who
did just save 3 PKs in their Carabao Cup match.
Okay, there you go. Maybe it's Ward. Yeah, I mean it's whatever team you don't want 3 assets
Yeah.
from. I had Bentley from Wolves to start the season because I knew
Yeah.
I was not ever going to have 3
Yeah.
Wolves. So like don't pick like if you were on Vicario or
Mhm.
something, I would not pick the backup Spurs keeper because you might want 2 other Spurs
Right.
assets at some
Right.
point. So that would be the only thing I'd keep in mind.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
All right. Before we get to our drafts, just a recap of locks. We have forward, Erling Holland should absolutely be in every team. Midfield, Saka and Mbumo should absolutely be in every team. And in defense, you should have at least one Arsenal defender and probably at least one 4.0 defender in your team as well. Between that, there's quite a few options to make these teams. So, Jace, I'm very curious to hear your draft, especially after hearing that it has Nick Jackson in it. If you would like to share first.
I'm sorry, Nick Jackson. All right. Starting up top. Oh, I'll go back to front. Goalkeepers right now, like I said, I've got Flecken and Sanchez in the goalie slots. Van de Ven, Gabriel, Alexander Arnold, Mesraoui, and Hardwood Bellis in the back line. In the midfield, Rogers and Buemo, Semenyo, Smith Rowe, Saka. I almost had a really good song there for a minute. Buemo, Semenyo, Smith Rowe. You can add some nice flow to it. Up top, I've got Holland, Nick Jackson, and Chris Wood.
Who's the guy you want that you don't have in your current draft?
Palmer or Asala. I feel like
Second mid.
yeah, a
Yeah.
second mid. I've got a lot of value mids in that. I've got 3 value mids plus Mbuemo and Saka. So I think the only reasonable way to get to either of those would be to severely downgrade like one of my forwards or like Trent to get that extra money. But even with that, I don't know that I can get there to a Palmer or a Salah. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So I think I'm okay if I can make it up in the aggregate, but I'm not really sold that going without is again a good idea, right?
Yeah. So you have Saka, Bumo, and then basically 3
Yeah,
cheap
Smith Rowe,
guys
Semenyo, and
that you're going to
Rogers. Yeah,
rotate. Yeah. What if, let's say you can't get a premium, do you think you would go to Eze or would you rather have the 3 cheap
no, I
guys that
think
you
I'd
have?
rather have the 3 just because it enables me to be a little more flexible down the road. I'm not committed, and I haven't really enjoyed owning Eze these last couple of weeks. I just yeah, seems like he's just dodging points. So, I don't know. I don't know that you could convince me to go to Eze right now, right? I could probably be convinced to any other change on the field, but I just don't know that I really want Eze, which means he's probably gonna get a hat trick this weekend, but I'll stand by it. I just don't really want
He's
Eze.
playing Everton. We just
Dude,
talked
I
about
know.
how
Shite.
poor their
Yeah.
defense has been.
Yeah.
All right, very nice. Okay, I will share my team. I'll pull it up too so you can see it as we chat through it live. I'm really excited about this wild card. So I can't wait for it to go horribly wrong
Yeah, right.
by game week 7. All right. Keepers, I have Flecken and Verbruggen. Like I said, went with 2 4
Mhm.
5s, which is a little bit different for me. Defense, I have Gabriel Salibra, Aina from Forest, Mikalenko, and 4.0 is Greaves. Mikalenko I've had since the start of the season. So he's 4.3 now. I think he's a very good pick at 4.3. He's a little bit cheaper. But for me, each time he rises in price, I'm getting the full point 1 on that. So if he goes to 4-4, I can sell him for 4-4. If he goes to 4-5, given Everton's fixture run, I think he's going to be more popular. So I left him in the team hoping that he recovers some of that value, but I can still rotate him and play him as needed too. Midfield, I did go 2 premium, so I went Saka, Palmer, Bumo, and then my rotation mids are Semenyo and Rogers, very similar to you. And the forward line is Chris Wood, Calvert-Lewin, and Erling Haaland. So I sacrificed second forward. I really have Haaland and 2 cheap guys, and I traded Trent down to another Arsenal defender, and that's what got me to Palmer. The other version I was playing with was trading Palmer down to Eze. I would be able to get Trent and then potentially get Raya and have Trent, Raya, Gabriel, or something like that. In defense, it just felt like too much money in defense to do that. And I think I can cover Trent with 2 Arsenal center backs, knock on wood. But that's my hope.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And you're fine with Michaelenko's having the flag by him. You just want to keep him in the team to try and recoup some of that value. That's the approach?
I'm not concerned. He's not seriously injured, and I, at least as of right now, am expecting him to go back into the team when he returns. I think they had Garner, who's typically a midfielder, was playing right back for Everton, and we know that they're not a deep team, or left back for Everton, I should say. Excuse me. So, yeah, I'm expecting him to be fit within a week and go back into the team. So I think 4-3, if it enables something else in your team, is interesting.
Yeah,
And I have point 2 in the bank. So that was a fun surprise.
that is a fun surprise. Um, yeah. So you're going Gabriel Saliba double up in the back, huh? You paid
Yeah,
the price
that
for
was my
that
trade-off for
last
Trent.
season, didn't you? For not doing that.
I
Now you're
did.
gonna reap
I
some of
learned
those
my lesson.
rewards.
I typically never do double defense of the same
Yeah,
team, but I think this particular fixture run for Arsenal is worthwhile.
yeah. I think that makes sense.
I did not want to get negative points by having one Arsenal defender. That defender would get a clean sheet and I would lose rank because everybody else had like
Yeah,
1.5 Arsenal defenders.
yeah,
So I figured 2 was the way to go here.
yeah. I see that for sure. That makes a ton of sense.
Any last comments on this team, your team,
No,
or
you've given me
Wildcard
some
6?
pause for thought here, as I figure out if there's a way to upgrade one of my guys to a Palmer, and in turn into a Salah when duty calls, whether that's, downgrading Nick Jackson to Solanke to get that point 2 and Van de Ven to Greaves to get an extra point 5 and the second goalkeeper to 4.0, then, I might be able to build
Yeah.
something there.
Well, it's early in the
Yeah.
week. You still can create a lot of
And we've
room
got
and a lot
midweek
of
fixtures,
budget.
right? We've
Yep.
got the Europa League kicking off tomorrow and Thursday, Conference League Thursday and Friday. And then, of course, we've got the normal games and Carabao Cup games. That'll resume across the week as well. So just something to keep your eyes
Yeah.
on.
It's a good point for your team. I think everybody will probably have 2 midfielders below 6.0.
Mhm.
I think having 3 of those guys where you have to play 2 every week is difficult, and Eze is a nice way to upgrade one of them
Mhm.
without trading down elsewhere too much, but there's not a lot of guys between the sub 6 and the premiums other than Eze and Bumo. So I feel like it's either you go a little bit to Eze or you go way up to Palmer and you have to give up something substantial.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, look forward to seeing everybody's wildcard teams this week. Just want to thank everybody again for listening. Reminder to please rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your shows. We are on X, Instagram, and threads at FPL_free hit pod. If you want to vote in our DCL versus Chris Wood poll and polls like it, remember to follow us on X, formerly Twitter. And join us next week as we cry about inevitably what has gone wrong with these wildcard teams, recap game week 6, and look forward to game week 7. Take care.